So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Kevin and Mark from Right Brain Studios, a friend of RBN's, and
What's going
also,
on, man?
yes, the guys who also produced Rome Death to America. Good to see you guys on the show.
Always great to see you, Jaybe.
Yeah, thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that I wanted to do is talk about the event that you guys are going to be having. This is going to be an amazing event where you guys are actually going to be talking about revolution. Now, Cuban revolutionary films. Now, one of the things that I said in the description that Cuban activists will be joining. Unfortunately, they were unable to at the last minute. So unfortunately, they are not with us for this stream, but hopefully we can get them in on a later stream. But if you guys would like to discuss what you guys got going on very soon, I think it's in 7 cities across the nation.
7 cities in virtual. I do want to apologize on behalf of the Jose Marte youth at the Alianza Martiana. Hope I did that right, in Little Havana. So these are young activists, definitely doing a lot more than I was at their age. And yeah, they did a caravan today to raise money for Cuba in addition to this event. That's been, I mean, this is the thing. We kind of wanted to try organizing an event with activist communities because even more passionate than like cinephile and film communities and having that ability to organize something as big as this, I think activists, it doesn't really get any better than that. And having that like passion to follow it through. But originally it was just going to be 2 locations and then virtual because we wanted to see what we could do with virtual. When we created the virtual theater, the idea at the time was like, it was still kind of, it wasn't quite COVID, but when we designed it, it was. But when it got followed through on, people still weren't going out as much as you'd like them to. But finally, people are really starting to go out and want to be out for films and be around people. And so we thought maybe the virtual just becomes this extension where no matter where you are in the US, you'd still be able to tune in. Like if I lived in Florida and there was only going to be in like these 3 cities I couldn't go to, I can still participate. And then it swelled to like, you started getting a lot of contacts and then it swelled to like, 7 locations. The last one came through like last night, Texas University. So it's a pretty interesting mix of,
excited about that one.
It's bigger than we thought, which is probably why the guest thing kind of, I think for everybody, it's been a little more intense than we thought it would be. But if it works out the way we think it will, I mean, it could be big for us and just big for Cuba in general, because I mean, essentially it's deceptive on the flyer because it says 15%. We get a lot of messages like you're giving 15% to Cuba. It's like, no. It's also a third of it also goes to the national network on Cuba. So it's more like 50% of it goes to Cuba with the rest of it to whoever takes the time to host it. And then we're only getting the other 25%. So it's big chunks going to Cuba for sure.
Wow. So really you're just doing the best you possibly can to advocate and help out people who are speaking out for Cuba as well as Cuba itself. This is amazing.
Yeah. It's I think that you have to tie the direct action to it nowadays. Like in a perfect world, and you even see some channels where it's like my contribution to the working classes, whether it's teaching Marxism or doing this, it's like that's all really good. But anybody that lives in some of these working class communities, like you can walk into a BFW bar where veterans are struggling or go to Kensington Avenue and nobody wants to listen to you preach Marxism. Like you need to feed them. You need to be able to actually give them supplies. So with the Mayday Brigade, they actually do send people from America to Cuba for these sort of what do you call those? Like they go for like 2-week periods. I think Chris Smalls was there too. And they help out. They do actual aid and they actually bring supplies with them. So, I mean, it's dodgy with the embargo because when we did the series, the embargoed films of Cuba, which you can find on our website, we really wanted to like pay a Cuban professor to do these little introductions. We weren't even allowed to pay them. Like, it was illegal to send them money, which was really, it felt kind of gross. And I was like, well, I feel bad because you're doing this, but I think unless they have a relative or something in America, I could not legally give Victor any money. So I think the goal is
love Victor though.
Yeah, he's been super helpful.
Victor, you are out there.
Yeah, he's this really cool guy. He was alive during the revolution. He's like 65 years old or maybe 70, and he it was really cool to get to interact with someone so far away and bond over Cuban cinema. Really.
Wow. So just as far as how you guys came up with the concept, and this is a question also for you, Mark, if you would like to answer this. How did this idea come up? And was Cuba your first choice, or were you guys wanting to do other different countries? And are you going to be doing other different countries as well in the next year or so?
Oh, absolutely. We have it's kind of our secret sauce. So we won't say exactly, but we have, Right Brain TV, in all of our work, we try to have a global perspective, international, because we understand that solidarity does not come I mean, it starts in your community, but it has to go all the way out. And that is why we believe so much in the power of cinema, because you can seep into these cracks that you wouldn't normally get to go. Like we said, it's very difficult to travel or to even send goods to Cuba. So the Cuba being 50 miles off the coast of the U.S., it was one of the first locations that we wanted to like focus on. And like Kevin said, we already have the embargoed films on there. What we're doing this Friday night is a slate of 8 short films. Thursday night, sorry. This Thursday night, it's going to be a slate of 8 short films, and it's going to tell the story as complete as we can in a 2-hour block of pre-Castro cinema, because there's some like consumerism to it, and you can see like the American flourishes because they were going for that capitalist, like the sheen, and it's in color. But then the revolution happens, and Castro takes over in 59, 60, and it goes back to black and white. It's more handheld. It's almost a guerrilla do-it-yourself style. And they actually called that the imperfect cinema because they knew full well, and I think I talked about this last time, is that the means of production is very important to think about here, because some of the films, like it does matter where you get the camera, and it does matter who's funding it. And where like Soy Cuba we talked about last time, they had a director sent from the Soviet.
Yeah. I Am It's a great film where it was like almost completely funded by the Soviet Union, and they sent all their really top end equipment. So it's like every shot in that movie is like a money shot. But the Soviets, I think they didn't like it because it wasn't communist enough.
Yeah.
But the crazy part is we're up till 7 a.m. kind of finalizing the curation. We kind of went back and forth because we're trying to tell the most complete story of Cuba, like from the perspective of its filmmakers and
through short film.
We found this rare. It's like a commercial, but it's like a short film. But it was when the U.S. was working with Batista, so it's just straight up consumerism propaganda. It's in like glimmering 50s like color film, and there's like a woman that looks like she could be going into her house in Florida, and like a nice like upper class house, and she's got like a purse, and she's gotten to the beauty salon and everything. And then like once Castro overthrew Batista, he immediately set up a film organization. And it went to like gritty black and white on the ground footage of like them with like machine guns
in the mountains, like raising up. And we talked about this before. There's an interesting perspective of revolutionary cinema during the actual revolution, and when they're using this is we saw this post World War II in like Italy, the Italian neo-realists, which this imperfect cinema very much is taking from. But they're using actual like war-torn areas, and you just, when the troops move out, you move in and you start shooting.
Yeah. I mean, to go back to what he said, because we didn't answer it, we're doing a new series called Revolutionary Review, where we want to team up with activist groups and explore the cinema in their country and tell the story of the country and its liberation often, or its fight for liberation through cinema, and then find a way to sell tickets to that and give it back to those communities. So when thinking about like what we're going to do next, it's like, but is there an activist community that exists in America for that? So we looked at Mexico. You know, you have a lot of strong Latino activism, especially in California and Texas, and with Kids in Cages. I think that there's a lot of good Mexican revolutionary cinema. DPRK, you know, we're friends with an organization called Nut It All, which is all about breaking the stigmas and trying to get over to the DPRK, which now there's a travel
great
ban.
organization.
They also have really good cinema. DPRK cinema is a little different, like no love stories, no action. It's like the most you're going to get is a woman working on a farm, finding a better way to use the means
of country.
Better way to use the means of production. There's actually a DPRK love story movie where this woman thinks her husband's cheating on her, and it turns out he's actually in love with the country.
Yeah, he's just working too much.
He's working too much.
The
anti-twist is like, no, actually, I love DPRK more than you. And then like the other woman grows jealous that her husband loves the DPRK that much or something. It's interesting, definitely different.
And yeah, that's why we like pulling it out of the American perspective, because it really, when you turn the table and you see this cinema from the eyes of the people who are making it in these like historical points, it's just really interesting, and I think it's eye-opening.
America is one of the only countries, when it comes to some of these revolutionary countries we look at, especially like a Cuba, where Cuba's Film Institute is very much linked to its government. It was like one of the first things Castro established. I mean, some of the films they were making, when they started them, they were trying to overthrow the government, and then they finished them after they overthrew the government through this new institute. So like the footage exists like before they even came to power, which is crazy.
Continuation.
In America, it's like, you know, there's no revolution of that nature, but you have basically Hollywood as the mainstay, and it's kind of going exactly against sort of the will of the revolutionaries. So it's really amazing to find countries like the DPRK, where they kicked out the Japanese invaders, also in control of the means of production of their film industry. So you get to actually see their story as it existed. And that's why I like the DPRK. The most important thing is like working for the government and trying to create, the most efficient farming tools and stuff like that. So that's their cinema. The thing about Cuba that makes it a really good first entry point is I know a lot of people that probably aren't going to watch a DPRK film, like even cinephiles. I mean, we try to get people into it, but it's not a great starting point for people who are either new to film or new to revolutionary politics and history and things like that. So Cuba's a really good, like, I wouldn't say it's like mainstream, but their films are like pretty good starting point for people.
Oh, and it was, they already had a film institute dating back. I mean, they have a film from 1897 that we were able to find.
Yeah,
it's a 1-minute print. So we're talking back when Edison in the kinetoscope at the very beginning, and then it's interesting because you see, talking about means of production, those things did get scattered. I mean, the film camera was only a couple years old, and it was already in Mexico, it was already in Cuba. And I mean, that part is almost as interesting to us. And we always love putting the context up.
Yeah. And I think it's always good to see film's a really good art medium because not everybody likes to read, not everybody likes to put that kind of time in, and there's something just ephemeral and fleeting about it, but it also combines photography, it combines music, it combines all these different elements. And what's interesting that I think we're going to try to show at the event is, yes, we're telling the story of Cuba's liberation through 8 films. You watch these 8 films and you see pre-Castro peasants starting to get frustrated with Batista's government, with one of the earliest propaganda films ever made by the Cuban revolutionaries before they took power. So they were trying to get this film out there of peasants rising up, much more primitive, maybe with like a rifle. Next movie is like, Castro's getting sworn into power with like what looks like hundreds of thousands of people watching. The footage is absolutely insane. The streets are packed out. And then like the third film to kind of complete that first 3 trilogy is like, now they're fighting the Americans around the time of the Bay of Pigs. And it's like Che's in these movies. It's kind of mind blowing to think of like him as almost more of a
he's
star power.
Sometimes.
Che loading a grenade launcher in some of these films. You're right there in the action.
You're watching history, and they knew what was. I mean, imagine if George Washington and those guys had access to a camera during the Revolution. It's going to have a very specific perspective, and it's just really cool to see history unfold like that in real time, in the voices and through the eye of these people.
The biggest problem we actually had was there was too many movies. Last night we spent 3 hours trying to cut it down. It was like 2.5 hours we had, because there's this one film where I don't want to say titles because I don't want to like ruin anything for anyone, but there's a great film towards the end of their cinema. Well, what we're calling the end, like the late 70s, it's in color because a lot of it's not. And Fidel Castro goes to visit this guy who participated in the revolution, who's very old now and lost his eyesight. And he doesn't know that he's talking to Fidel Castro. It's pretty wild. He's blind. Yeah, that's the twist, is he doesn't reveal it till the end. So this blind former peasant is talking to the leader of the country and doesn't even know it. It's pretty conceptual.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing story as well. But, it's just, I think that one of the things that is, and I spoke about this when you guys were on my channel, is the concept of art. And everybody's talking about Oliver Anthony's Richmond, north of Richmond. Yeah. And while there's many people on either side that have a disagreement or an agreement with the song, the point is that art can carry over these types of movements and sentiments and really affect people, not just mentally, but also emotionally. And I think that's one of the best parts about having a streaming service like Right Brain and having focuses like this, because we can academically know exactly what's going on in Cuba and we can just have it here. But wait till you see it in its art form and then it affects you here.
You feel it then, yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, film's like a poetry in motion. It really is it is a language in a lot of ways. Like the fact that we could bond with someone like Victor who lives so far away, before we even get to the beliefs in politics and things like that, it's just the belief in cinema as language, the power to tell your own story through moving pictures, I think is.
And we said it before. I mean, a lot of these films don't have dialogue. And I was going to say, even if they did, you wouldn't even necessarily need to see it translated. film is great because you understand what's going on. You can just look at it. Um, yeah,
No, I'm gonna let it go back to Jaybe.
Yeah, sorry, we cut you
get
off.
too excited.
Yeah.
Get too excited. You gotta tone it down. All right, relax.
Well, no, I mean, I think that's the part and I think this is one of the beautiful parts, especially about films from foreign countries outside the U.S. Sometimes they let the scenario or they let the scene breathe, right? What they'll do is they'll show you everything that happens without it having to be dialogue whatsoever, right? But the thing is that it's just like body language. 86% of what you say does not come out of your mouth. Same thing as goes for a movie. Sometimes a scene will not have to have any dialogue or narration whatsoever. But through seeing it, you actually see what's going on and what it translates to without having to anybody say a word. And I think that's one of the beautiful parts about it. And so you taking that language of cinema and putting it with something revolutionary, I think is absolutely wonderful. And I think that one thing, especially for us, well, for me as a watcher, and for many other people who are probably watching right now, is to use this cinema and just even sit down with a family member or a friend and go, hey, I found this movie. It's really interesting. And then you can tell maybe some of the premise about it and then watch it. And then this may ignite something within somebody else. Because the thing is, a lot of times you'll have a lot of people in this country who will go, yeah, we're fighting for freedom and opportunity, and we're fighting for liberation, right? But here's the thing. These films show that too. It's just not in the United States. But the thing is that we respect the fight for freedom and liberty. And so if you just say this is a movie about soldiers fighting for freedom and liberty, a lot of times people are going to automatically think, oh, well, it's the United States. And it's like, no, this is from people in a different country. But we can identify with that and we can use that as a way to say, well, look, if they're fighting for freedom and unity, why have we stopped as far as, here in the United States? Because it feels like we went stagnant a little bit too.
Yeah, there's a great quote. The band slips my mind, but I think it's like, if you smile at me, I'll understand, because that's something everyone does everywhere in the same language. Meaning, like, if I smile, that's something that's body language based, like you said, that we could pick up on. And like, what's interesting is there's one film we didn't pick that really illustrates that, because again, we didn't have enough time, and we were like, there's almost too much good Cuban cinema. And the film more pertained to that idea than maybe the revolution. But there's a documentary that's like 9 minutes long. We're not going to play it, so we'll just say it's called For the First Time. People should look it up, where they took around like Charlie Chaplin films. Like, it was like their first time getting Charlie Chaplin films to Cuba in, like, I guess like 55 or something, or 60, maybe 65. And they're like showing it to children and stuff like that in Cuba, and they're laughing like just as hard as any American kids would be laughing at. You know what I mean? It was like, it's like showing them the Three Stooges, comedy or those kind of things. And there's like no dialogue in any of those movies, so it still connects with people no matter where they live. They could be living in Cuba, and they could still, that laughter still translates. But no, I mean, I actually think of the Rome documentary and Cuba, where I feel like the Rome doc is, in America, like we haven't had a revolution yet, but what Rome's talking about is what you would see in some of these other countries where they have access to machine guns and the ability to, build that kind of a movement without that massive militarized police that we have to face. But with the Rome doc, I mean, it's almost like if Rome was living in any other country, we probably would have captured a revolution if we would have went over and filmed with them. You know what I mean? Because in any other country, in a lot of the countries Rome references in the film, like, or when we do the live Q&As, like, yeah, I mean, they actually were able to document and film their own overthrow of the government. Like, we went to Detroit and actually were able to film Rome.
And that's that continuity. Yeah, if America fell next week, this would be, the Rome movie would be that, like, kind of pre-version. And that's why we always talk about context. And even if it's just a couple lines, like, if, like you said, if you sit down with a family member, you don't have to say it's Cuba, you don't have to say the dates and stuff. People don't want that history lesson, and that's why we chose short films. We're in and out. They're 15 minutes long, and it's that pure emotion, that pure poetry, and that's why people have like a spiritual connection to film, where you can feel it. And I just think with the Revolutionary Review, and like we said, we are gonna go all around the world. We can't say, but we got all kinds of international cinema planned for these blocks, and this is just the first one.
We're like 5 years. It's kind of sick. We're like 5 years planned out. I mean, not saying we don't come up with things on the fly, but like a lot of times when people see on the site something we were developing a couple of years ago, and like we put a lot of thought into it. So he was actually living with me for 5 months or for 5 weeks while he was going through a life change. And so we stayed together, which is like, I think the only time we ever lived together. And
it's one long meeting.
Yeah, it was like one long meeting that's like, we're like 5 years ahead.
There's
like 24 collections we want to do. There's so much good cinema from countries everywhere, from Thailand to, I mean, you name it, Vietnam. I mean, countries you wouldn't expect.
Golden Triangle.
We're trying to crack West Africa, but I'm going to be honest, that's one we're really interested in, especially with all the Africa Rising stuff and the stuff happening in Niger and Mali. So, and it's a tough. We're still trying to figure it out because we only like to curate stuff that we fully think we have our head around, and like that was different. I mean, it's very, very different. It's not like the Castro with the machine guns. It's a totally different kind of cinema. It's much more rooted in Africa's history, going back hundreds of years in the films. They play out old folk tales. There's Nigerian comedies with the shysters. And I mean, it's just a lot. And then you have West Africa being so many different nations, and they're not all similar. They're very different. Every different region.
And a lot of times there will be like the colonizers will make their films about the area, but it's more of that like almost behind the glass film.
Yeah, and a lot of
like a French film about Africa.
A lot of these French filmmakers, I mean, there's a lot of great French cinema out there, but they went to a lot of these countries, and you'll look up like what's the one? I butcher the names of a lot of the African West African countries, so I don't want to say them, but there's a couple of them. Yeah, Cameroon, for instance, like a lot of those very different from going over to Burkina Faso, but a lot of them like French filmmakers is all you can find in the 60s and 70s, and that's like. We don't really want to play. We saw a lot of Cuban cinema that was made by great French filmmakers. We're not that interested in playing stuff by like a French filmmaker about Cuba. We want to play films by Cuban filmmakers. I mean, even if they're well made,
it's important. It's in their voice, from their viewpoint, from their camera eye.
And that goes to like doing the Rome doc. It's like the last thing we wanted to do was have us in the movie or any voiceover or anything like that. It's like let Rome tell his story, and we'll
we're the fly on the wall. Yeah. We're happy to be that. That's what we like.
When I went to Nashville, I mean, I told them, I was like, I'm going to do everything I can to get Rome there. I think it'll be so much more valuable to have him talk about the movie than me talk about like the camera angles and why we did this. To me, that's like the least exciting part of Death to America. I think it's very well made, but I think Rome is the most important part of that film. And I think that goes for any region we're trying to cover.
Well, let me ask you guys about that, because you guys recently went to Nashville to the Defy Film Festival. And from what it looked like, it was a great review of the entire documentary. How was the feeling when you guys were there, and the feeling of the room while the documentary was playing versus the feeling of the room after while you guys were doing the Q&A? How was that?
Oh, it was incredibly powerful. The people in Nashville, the community showed out. We had it. Rome was the movie was basically sold out, and not a person left the theater between the end of the film and the Q&A, because everyone saw Rome was decked out. I'm sure you saw the pictures in that all white, and everyone knew he's a guy who walks in the room and everyone goes like, "Oh, who's that guy?" And Rome knows that too. And he was so, I mean, he's just so charismatic. He was great. Everyone wanted to, like, they just watched him for an hour speaking, and they wanted more. And like I said, the theater was still when that movie was on. People. You could hear a pin drop at some of the more dramatic scenes. It was really beautiful.
Yeah, one funny thing though was there's a scene where his friend CT is talking about the day he got robbed. He says he was eating a pizza, he got hit in the back of the head with a gun. He like spits. It's a brutal scene. Yeah. It was really brutal to edit because I met CT and he's just such a good person. He's give you the shirt off his back. Next time you come to Detroit, come over to my house. We'll get you a nice meal. They're just so giving. And when that scene was on, I mean, you hear a pin drop, and then Rome, and he brought a friend from out of town named AJ, and they're just laughing their ass off at their friend lacking, and
he's like, I know that guy, and it was just,
and we're sitting next to him like, oh my god,
it was just, and that's why like it was great, Rome being there, because there was just that added level of authenticity. Is that like it was such a rote thing to him that it was like at this point funny. I was his boy and he was clowning on him.
The joy that I get in a weird way is like 3 years ago we went to that festival, and that's how we kind of have a foothold there. Is they played a film that nobody would play about addiction in Boston, and we brought the guy from the homeless shelter who made the movie. He went from the homeless shelter out to Nashville to like 100 people cheering for him, and it was cool to come back 3 years later and bring somebody like Rome, where I think it's I mean, don't get me wrong, addiction, the method of Mile in Boston, super relevant. But right now, I think when it comes to what Black people are facing day to day, that is probably the pulse of what I think one of the biggest issues happening right now is. And I think that to come back with somebody who I think embodies a completely different kind of suffering was really powerful. I mean, it was a mostly white crowd, but I mean, in a way, I think Rome liked that because it was getting that message to people who you maybe wouldn't think would connect with it, especially in Nashville. We thought, are we going to get death threats? Are we going to get harassed? I mean,
you hear things about the South you don't know. But it was such like community is the word. It's almost corny, but it's like it's kind of what we're going for here, right? Communism, guys. It was very receptive.
The weekend though, like in general, was one of the best weekends ever. I haven't seen Rome in a year and a half, so I mean, it's not like we hang out all the time. So it's been a long time since I've seen him, and I was like, at first it was like, are we all going to stay together? We had told him we were going to get a big Airbnb, but that kind of collapsed. And then we're staying in this little Econo lodge, and Rome's like, all right, I'm here, and I'm like, do we even have enough space? And we go in, it's not huge, but there's 2 beds. And then he's like, oh, I brought a friend who we didn't know. And under normal circumstances with anybody, you'd be like, oh, I'm staying with a guy I don't really know, but like. The minute Rome got out and that kind of sly smile came across his face, if you meet him in person, I'm sure you have. He's like infectious. It was like I hadn't seen my best friend in like in a year.
Yeah, I mean, it was a sleepover. It was a big. It was a whole lot of fun. We
were definitely getting some funny looks seeing Rome and his friend AJ hanging out with probably the 2 nerdiest white dudes you've ever seen. But no, they definitely walk into a gas station. But no, it was great, man. Like it was just so fun. It was like. I don't know. It was just weird. We all bunked up in this one hotel room. The 4 of us.
I'm glad you brought up the gas station because the other thing Rome's so good at is like we could have been filming him there, and it could have been part of the movie because he's talking to the cashier and the security guard at the gas station, like pulling the movie up, like telling this guy about like communism,
talking to girls, like talking to anyone who will listen. Yeah, we were in a bad part of Nashville.
Yeah, so he's posted up in the Waffle House. People are listening to him speak. In the gas station. In the parking lot of Wendy's, like he is always on point and on message. Like
he's the quintessential example when we do a project is like you watch a video of Rome and then you say, yeah, this is a movie. You see what he's doing, and you're like, this is a movie. Because not everything's a movie. A lot of people come to us like we get a lot of DMs like you should make a movie on this. It's like a movie is like a year and a half process. It's like raising a child. The film itself, like it goes through the whole creation process and then going around to pitch it. And I mean, even me and Rome were saying it's like. We made this movie like a year ago and we're just showing it to people in public now. I mean, this is like old to us in a way. So like you can't really do any movie unless you feel like you could stick with it that long and be passionate. But with Rome, it's like he just brings that to the table. You know what I mean?
Like you said, with that his sly smile, like as soon as you see him, as soon as he's up on screen doing his thing, it's immediately engaging. And like I said, the 5 Film Festival, we love it there. The people of Nashville were so receptive and Rome, obviously, he's a star, man.
To have Rome's image on the front of Nashville scene, which I think it's like a 250,000 following on Twitter, like the Nashville art, and have like him with the Workers' Party flag with Death to America is like, it's surreal. I mean, we didn't think it would even.
We thought that title was going to make it disqualified. We were almost daring ourselves as like how far, but people are there for it. People. The Q&A is the other thing I wanted to say. It was a majority white crowd, but it was diverse. We had a veteran stood up and asked like a very pointed question, and Rome like just took it and ran, and it became like a 7-minute discussion. There was a 9-year-old kid who must have been there with his parents. He stood up and asked a question, and Rome just took the mic and like basically just talked to him, like kind of trying to take him on. It was a beautiful moment.
The kid was talking about it was weird because like we couldn't see him, but we could hear his voice, and he sounded like he was like 8 years old or something. I was like, you brought your kid to this movie? He was like talking about Trump and like. Blah, blah, Trump is the biggest threat. And Rome handled it very smoothly, but he flipped it on the keys. Like, how many drones did Obama drop? And Rome's masterful in that way. You don't have to do anything. I just gave him the mic and was like, he took most of the question.
Yeah. One thing I do know about Rome, and shout out to Rome if he's watching, but is that the person you see on screen is exactly the same person you meet in real life. There's no,
and that's so rare. That authenticity, so rare.
Yeah. And let me ask you guys this, as far as, your subject when it comes to finding somebody to film a documentary on, is that what you're looking for? Basically, the person that is on screen is the same person that they are in real life. Is when it comes to a subject, like what are some of the hallmarks of a subject that you guys look for as far as who you choose to do a documentary on?
That's a great question.
Yeah. So, I mean, with film being a visual medium, which I think a lot of people forget about, And also the fact that you don't want things to be one note. You want to pick someone like Rome, where on one hand you try to put yourself in the perspective of the average viewer. Because there was a time where we had a more of a punk thought process of like, we need to burn down the industry, and we only need to reach people who I guess are like minded. I mean, it's almost natural that you feel that you want to reach people like you, but then you start thinking, no, what if I can get a movie like Death to America in the living room of like a 50-year-old white woman who lives in the suburbs, or we need to wake up minds that maybe are asleep, not necessarily people we already agree with, not that echo chamber. So I always think of somebody who has both sides to it. On one hand, he's saying some things that you may not agree with. On the other hand, he's feeding his community. It always has to have, it doesn't have to be that, but it has to have that dimension to it. If it was just Rome saying Death to America and we got a bunch of footage of him with like a guns and stuff like that, to me, it's just not interesting.
It's
and
just rhetoric.
I mean, I'll be honest, when we went up there, we had this image, having never met Rome, of like, just being filmmakers, like, especially my camera guy, like guys with machine guns, big militias. And like, we really thought we wanted that. And then the more time we spent with them, we realized we didn't want that. I think another thing we think about is, it's not about being like, so I think with YouTube, the difference is because you're doing streams every day, it's more like news. You kind of have to capture like what's happening in that moment. Like the Richmond, like Virginia, like everybody was covering because that's happening in the moment. With film, it's like, instead of doing like a jab at, you guys are kind of, I think every day kind of jabbing at the powers that be, the imperial forces, where film is like you're pulling the fist back over a year for like one punch that hopefully equals those jabs. So you have to think of something you're going to be able to sit with for 8 months and still feel that energy when you wake up. Because I spent probably hundreds of hours on that. I was looking at that room footage forever. I mean, it took me 3 months just to go through all of it and categorize it. So it's got to be something you can sit with. But I also think we're like a little bit sick and fucked up because looking at that stuff for a lot, it's brutal. But you know what? You have to think, if this is brutal for me to watch some of this footage from Detroit, what's it like to live like that? I mean, that's, you know what I mean? That's crazy. I mean, I felt like I lost hair on my head and years on my life just being there and seeing some of that stuff because it's just absolutely brutal. And I think the fact that Rome and a lot of his friends can put a smile on and be so welcoming in those kind of circumstances is mind blowing. And that's something you also want to put the camera in places people can't normally go. So going to one of the 10 most dangerous parts of America is really scary, but how else are you going to film one of the most dangerous and oppressed parts of America? You have to go. And so to be able to be the moving eye for somebody who will never get to see that in their life is really important, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really about just revealing the truth. I mean, your truth tellers really behind the camera. And so it's, I think that's one of the benefits of doing what you guys are doing. And then on top of that, truth tellers, real recognizes real, right? So when you guys are looking and curating, for instance, these short films from Cuba, you're going to recognize a truth teller behind the camera when you see one. And so this is the benefit of having you guys curate this. So and plus, one thing I really appreciate about you was that you said that you want to find Cubans who are telling the Cuban story, not guys from France that are telling the story. You're basically saying, no, I want to see people tell their own truth, not somebody tell somebody else's truth, which is one thing I
part of the imperialism.
I'm sorry. No. Can you finish? I'm sorry. I'm done.
It's part of the imperialism when you have the oppressor coming in and with their cameras and stuff filming, because it's going to be from their perspective.
Say that again for people in the back.
It's part of the imperialist mindset when the oppressors go in with their cameras and equipment from their camera eye, and it's not going to be, like you said, the truth. That's going to come from the people who are fighting. And I mean, we always say the camera and the gun, they're two dangerous weapons in kind of different directions. One takes life, the other gives life, as we say. But I mean, is the power.
Especially in Africa, like a lot of the Burkina Faso cinema and stuff it's in French, but I think it was kind of bummed out when we were trying to, we really were going to, that was like actually going to be the next one, I think, before even Cuba, was once a lot of that stuff was going on around Burkina Faso, we're like, man, we really should be digging into this whole region of cinema. And we started digging, it's like French name, French director, but it's like, it was kind of frustrating. It's like, damn, like, didn't they let anybody make their own movies? But like, I mean, if you look at the footage, I mean, I don't think so. I don't think there was a lot of access to any camera equipment. The French, the colonizers definitely weren't handing, film equipment over. I kind of wish the Soviets would have sent some film equipment to Africa, because just what an incredible story to tell in the history. And I mean,
I said it a couple of times, but it needs to be said again. It's just the means of production with this stuff. Everyone thinks that Hollywood is the factory, right? And it almost goes unsaid, like how much goes into that. That's a propaganda arm of the U.S. government, like of imperialism. That is the face of America to most of the world. It's Coca-Cola and fucking whatever is the Marvel comic of the week.
I mean, there's a great documentary called the Coke and Pepsi War, which actually on the site by a great Australian journalist named John Pilger, that shows how much even like something like Coca-Cola shaped American foreign policy. I mean, it's crazy. Assassinations, and it gets real crazy. What soda did the president prefer, and like how is that dealt with in foreign countries? And there was a while where they wouldn't let communist countries get access to Coca-Cola.
Oh yeah, it was like a big deal to catch like Gorbachev drinking a Coke or something.
Yeah, but
because it is a symbol, like you said. How many deaths go into that one bottle of Coke? Like it's not zero. I can tell you that.
There's a quote. There's a quote. It's like you put a Coca-Cola in the hand of a man to let him know what he's fighting for.
Yeah,
that was like a quote they used to tell army soldiers in the '60s. There was another one where it was like, when you don't see a Coca-Cola like soda can, that you've gone beyond the bounds of civilization or something like that. It's crazy.
And we see it now is like, where is the Starbucks? Like, where has the U.S. government set up shop, and down the street is fast casual dining.
That's the other thing, though. I mean, it's just really interesting because America is the inverse of all these countries that we want to curate. Like, America is a situation where fascism, capitalism, and imperialism won, and so cinema reflects that because the Hollywood is in the hands of those fascist imperialist forces, and the Black Rock and the Vanguard who own everything. But you go to like Cuba, and it's like, no, the film and means production in that country is by the people who actually overthrew the government. So you just get a totally different truth from their cinema.
Let me ask you this as well. And I don't want to veer too far off, but this just came to mind. What is your hope for the future regarding cinema? Like, as I kind of think things are going to get worse before they get better, but they're guaranteed to get better right when we hit that wall, right? Because the thing is that as far as our nation's concerned, because let's be real, United States is really at the top of this Western hegemonic empire that we are seeing that is really trying to keep a hold on the world, but the world's become like Jello, and if you ever try to squeeze Jello in your hand, it can't stay. Art also follows within that, and so what is some of the things I should really say excited for in the future once the workers really take hold of the power structures in the United States? I would just like to, hear you guys what you think.
I think the early viewpoint with Right Brain was, 5-6 years ago. If you asked us, it would have been. I mean, when Bernie was coming up and we did our first talk about Bernie, it was this hopeful bliss, like we're gonna see a revolution in this country. And the whole time, my mom's like, it's not gonna happen. I watched the late '60s and what happened there, and everyone's gonna sell out. But I didn't listen to her, and then that did happen. I became disillusioned. Then it became like, having seen how this industry works on the inside, we just need to burn it down. But then just to show how far we've come, over the last 6-7 years, I think we're talking to a variety of journalists that reached out to us when we were talking to him. Didn't end up going through, but he was asking, because we had met him years ago, and then he now works at Variety, and he was saying, what has changed? I remember when I met you guys 6 years ago, it was very much like, fuck this, burn it down. But he's like, are you doing something positive? And I think that's the more proactive approach, and kind of fits where we think it's headed. Is it's not about necessarily just burning something down just for the sake of it, but it's much more in like the Rome way of like, how can we rebuild something in its place that also, it's about, building something as well.
That process has to start way before anyone we talk overthrows or capturing the government. And again, that is the U.S. imperial state understands the propagandistic value of film, but so do we. And I mentioned this at Defy, but the propaganda is not a dirty word. It's kind of information with a viewpoint in the most distilled way.
Propaganda is only a dirty word in America. Like China, you go to other countries and they talk about it pretty openly. But I would say, just to be candid, like, fuck LA. If you think LA is gonna be telling the stories of the working class, you can get the fuck out of here. I lived in LA, and I don't think anyone barely made a movie about anything except themselves. What it's like trying to date in Pasadena. These things that the average working person I meet, if I like go to a Kansas Film Festival, like they don't connect with that. Like now that film has gone into cell phones, and now that everybody's a camera in their hand and there's that access to it, you don't have to go to New York, you don't have to go to LA. I think that The stories need to be told from people who live in these flyover parts that you don't think about, even like a Florida, even like North Carolina. There's filmmakers all over the world right now.
Yeah.
Our vision would be to see, we already see Hollywood crumbling. I mean,
Yeah.
for one thing, I mean, Netflix had like one of the worst quarters ever last year. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then if you take into account of Russia,
They shed
I mean, their business model is almost built to fail in 10 years because they have built an audience that is so used to just devouring an entire show without thought in one day. I mean, they basically, you kind of like create, your user kind of evolves with you. You kind of start to merge. So if you're creating a new series every day and dropping all 8 of them, you create these people who just kind of fiendishly devour content like it's candy and throw it aside. So
it's like a checklist.
Yeah, and it costs like what, like 20, 30 million to make one project. So if you have to keep making stuff constantly all the time, I mean, they're spending, you know, hundreds of $1 million on content. I mean, and
it's
and just keeping up, and their audience is just, and then their audience will devour this thing they spent all this time and $30 million on in like a day. So eventually they've borrowed so much money that, and they also are in what, like 80% of homes or something. So there's no like room for growth for Netflix unless they're planning on like having a whole arm that just populates the country with new Netflix subscribers. Like, where are you going to grow that other 20%? So if you've already reached most of the globe, the only thing you can do is up your prices or get rid of password sharing. So like they're going to be in a situation, they've borrowed so much money. But the other thing is, I see people in the industry finally starting to revolt a little bit. Like I saw an interview recently where the guy that made Squid Game finally came out and said he like barely got paid shit for it. I mean, Netflix made like $250 million off this series and he got paid like 60 grand or something, which he could have got probably going to get a job for a year, pretty much, you know, anywhere with a college degree in outside the US. So I think like for a guy to be barely making a living, having made a show that yielded 250 million, and even he's calling it out, starts to get you thinking that people are becoming more class conscious in LA. But it's hard when you live in the 5th largest economy in the world, an economy that's bigger than most countries.
Yeah.
They're so cut off from the everyday. And like with the WGA strikes, I mean, it just shows how disconnected they are from the labor movement. That was handled like shit. I mean, I got in an argument with a couple of lefties that were, you know, they like certain movie studios, like an A24. So they're trying, there's like leftist movie podcasts, believe it or not. And they're trying to push the idea that these waivers were a good idea, but it completely makes no sense in the grand scheme of a general strike or a strike to make it waivers. So that like Paul Rudd and these guys can sign waivers and work on indie films during a strike. It gets rid of that's all of your leverage. The studios are not scared of like, you know, there's what, 180,000 or 200,000 members of SAG say. That's a very large labor movement, you'd think, but the leverage comes from the Paul Rudds and the Marvel stars that are like, we're not going to work until you give all these poor people in the SAG, you know, living wage and all that stuff. But the lower level members of SAG have no leverage. Nobody gives a shit in the studio that those guys aren't working, right? Like that's not gumming up any works. So when you have stars that are allowed to get little waivers, it'd be like if you did a general strike and certain railroads that work for like, you know, or Exxon Oilers could actually, Exxon, I'm going to do an indie Exxon thing. Can I just sign this waiver and let me go work for Exxon? It's like the studios that were getting indie waivers were big, massive conglomerates.
Yeah, and like the whole like, oh, it's indie. Like the word indie has been dead pretty much on arrival since it came out in the early 90s because immediately that gets commodified. And you think of Pulp Fiction came out and then there was 100 Pulp Fiction wannabes that come out. And that's the gross thing about Hollywood. I mean, in the way that capitalism can like take the one thing and then, you know, spin it and then out the other side comes just this export. And that's the thing. It can just go anywhere in the world.
To go back in this long-winded way to answer your question, I think that the only way it's going to work is if we do start connecting all these different factions and we start creating pockets of filmmakers, a lot like what Rome is trying to do, where he's trying to find footholds in different places. We're trying to do with film, because if Rome is going to lead a revolution in an idealized world, you're going to need someone there to document it. And right now, this LA shit's not going to cut it. These motherfuckers are not going to get out there in the thick of it and film anything like that. I mean, if anything, they're actually working for the empire. And I see some people like we respect SAG and WGA, and we definitely stand with those writers. However, the thing that's iffy on it is they are also like they make propaganda for the empire. I mean, that's what they do for a living. So it's almost like you're in a bind where you're like, you want to show solidarity, and we always will, but you also are a cog in the wheel of the mouthpiece of BlackRock. So I want you to be able to feed your family, but maybe you should, I don't know, maybe work a regular job if that's the kind of films you're going to make. If you know what I mean? It sounds cruel to say it, but if you're going to star in films that push the empire and the CIA and those talking points, is that really a job worth fighting?
And they only now are speaking about unions and strikes because it showed up at Third Door.
Door. Yeah, how many SAG and WGA writers, not saying all, but I don't see them coming out for like the Virginia miners and the different people that are organizing, and it's got to go both ways, right?
Well, I mean, you guys are bringing up a good point. I mean, the SAG after strikers, I mean, if they're making propaganda for the empire, that's like, if Lockheed Martin employees suddenly went on strike, it's like, do I support them? I mean, in
Yeah, it's
principle,
no,
I
it's no,
do, but I actually would prefer you guys just all quit.
yeah.
It's kind of like that. It's like you guys are actually working with a military, a military company. Okay, I support you guys go into a different industry. you know, so it's kind of like that.
Yeah, that's the
It's
hard truth about it. And yeah, these
yeah,
Hollywood people. I mean, Kevin was saying it before, but it film if Hollywood, it's just going to become a narcissism machine because everything is so curated, and it really is. It's just a product that gets stamped by an industry and sent out to the different corners.
The Hollywood, what I learned when I made my first film was how much the Hollywood establishment and the political establishment, and they are literally a mirror of each other. So cinema
Yeah,
needs to be a mirror. The revolutionaries need to be a mirror in the film industry because,
it's
like,
true.
the same people are at the wine parties. Like, you see the same, the five corporations there and everything on television that now and everything on film. I mean, it's just one mouth, and it's definitely that corporate colonialism that you hear, like Chris Hedges talk about, where they will find diverse voices to share these messages, but the messages that they are sharing is imperial. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you're like, oh, look at this Tyler Perry movie. Like, you can trust it because Tyler Perry, he's not a typical white guy, but yeah, but what's the message he's pushing? And how did Tyler Perry even get in that spot in the first place? And that's when you find out, oh, he's not going to challenge any power. Like we talked about the Fruitvale Station. I mean, they totally neutered him. I mean, Fruitvale Station was a really powerful film, and then they gave him like Black Panther, which was powerful for a superhero movie, but then they neutered him, and now he makes Black Panther 2 and probably like 5 bad movies. They folded him in. They realized this guy.
It's a co-op.
I think they thought this guy could actually be a threat to power with a movie like Fruitvale Station. Let's get him in here and get Coogler off doing.
And if you look, I mean, they do it with Star Wars, all of them, and I think we were talking about this a little bit on your show like a month ago. But you get this exciting, we'll say the word indie, right, in quotes, filmmaker, and they're making some stuff that looks like, okay, well, that looks like it could be dangerous if they got a bigger budget. But what they do is they give you the biggest budget, and here's $20 million. Go make this movie in a green screen room with 15 celebrities.
You see the story every time. It's what they do in politics. It's like you have someone who comes in, is like, I'm going to change everything. I'm going to make movies. It's going to change the world. And then when they get in, it's like, how about we just pay your bills for the rest of your life, and you can get and for a filmmaker to tell someone you're going to get a budget to make your dream movie, all you got to do is like stop making. You're not going to be able to make stuff like this anymore, but you get to make anything you could possibly want. And I mean, sadly, a lot of people sell out. One of the only filmmakers I think who's dangerous in a good way that you need to be worried about is like a Boots Riley. I mean, they can't stop him because his stuff is market viable. Like I Am Virgo, it did well. I mean,
it's good. It's very good. And kind of the full circle, like we said with the Rome doc and all this stuff, it is this an awakening process, because I do believe everyone in the back of their head has this like, fuck America. And then they scold themselves and say, no, we learned in school it's about patriotism. And I think we're so long past due with that. And the movie like Rome, a short block like this Cuba thing, we really hope it knocks those thoughts into the forefront and just gets people get off the train.
We got to start break the foothold. A lot of people have been indoctrinated since they were children, including like my parents or my dad's past. But even he used to say things about Cuba that I used to have to correct him on, because it's just been forced into their brain at such a young age that it takes a long time to sort of deprogram somebody. That's why film is a really good place to do it. One of the coolest things, though, to go back to Death to America, was just seeing the kind of people Rome would connect with. There was this really short-haired female comedian. She's real goofy. Like I would never expect her to be political at all, and she probably isn't. And hearing her like in the green room after the film show telling Rome, I think Death to America in my head, and I think it's like a dirty thought or something. And like hearing you say it out loud, it's like Rome was saying what a lot of people felt in these communities, but are too scared to say. I was amazed how many people that message, because when we named it Death to America, I mean, the movie was going to be called Tour for the Poor, and it was going to be a much more benign thing of just Rome just feeding poor people. That was like the thing you have to be really cautious of when you're making a documentary is, real life just happens as it goes. And so you have to be willing to change your game plans. When we got back, we're like, I mean, he didn't really do a tour for the poor, and he didn't go on tour because he's in Detroit. So it didn't make sense. And that's when we keep hearing him say Death to America in the editing room. And we're like, oh, that's it. That's the title. But when we announced it to his audience, it didn't do as well as we thought. We're getting a lot of comments saying you should change to this, make it more palatable. But I think a lot of people hate watched the movie in Nashville and came out of it like, wow,
Yeah.
I actually kind of like that.
It kind of knocks those thoughts, and they're like, wait, I have thought some of these things, and maybe I was wrong to scold myself. Like, maybe I should follow that thread. And yeah, that's what we hope to do with that film.
Every time we do a screening for it and a Q&A, which everyone always loves, I think there's always one person that makes the joke that everyone in the room is going to be like an FBI watch list now. I think like the moderator said it at Nashville, like, all right, we're all going to be on an FBI watch list. I think Rome legitimately said out loud that he told a crowd of people in Nashville that he's decked out in the suit, that you don't need to kill large parts of the U.S. government, just a handful.
Just the 15 most powerful.
Yeah, just a couple of them floating in a swimming pool in their backyard. And the reaction was crazy. Like, we've come so far as society that you could say that in a room in Nashville, film fans, and they're like rallying for it. Like, that was pretty cool. That shows
it's like we said, those dirty thoughts, crazy. They are in people's heads. And
the Bernie shit is old. We're not where we were the Kyle Kalinske days. Those people are like at least 10 miles behind where we all feel right now. We are about 10 times more desperate or 100 than we were then. So that's how far we've come, is that you have a room full of people in Nashville cheering for the thought of, these 5 powerful people that Rome doesn't mention, being taken out.
I mean, he was pretty cut and dry with.
He doesn't pack any punches when he does a Q&A. It's like, but it's exciting because 5 years ago during the Bernie period, if you'd have been saying that stuff, the Kalinskes, they would have been like, what? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, the desperation has really gotten more intense, especially in the last 4 or 5 years. So I can definitely tell you that. Especially with the onset of a lot more people are expressing their disdain for how the system works. You go on TikTok, you can see hundreds of videos of people saying, I am just exhausted. I'm tired of this. I saw it earlier today. Somebody just posted on TikTok how they're exhausted and tired of the system. And so really films like this shows that, it's really cathartic, because a lot of times you get that sense of, I'm not the only one. And so Death to America, that documentary basically is saying, hey, you're not crazy. What you're actually feeling is valid. And we're not going to try to sugarcoat or try to tell you how to cope with the system. No, we're going to tell you to go the opposite direction. We're going to tell you that this system is shit and we need to fight against it. And here's how. And so, being part of that process has got to be a very, makes you so proud, doesn't it?
I will say this. It's so lame to say it, like it feels cheesy, but I teared up one point in the process at the screening. It was dark, so I was able to not be seen. But hey, I think Rome teared up in the video after, so it's all good. But yeah, I was surprised that Rome was as emotional as he was, but I really wanted him to see that many people. I think I told him, like, if you come to Defy in Nashville, because he drove, that it's going to be a big crowd. I just knew it was going to be. But I would say for me, they had a special moderator come in. I think her name's Veronica. She's very active in Nashville when it comes to civil rights issues and things. Sharonica. Yeah, but I think, Sharonica Mars was her name. Yeah, really big in civil rights issues. And they brought her in specially for Rome. They really went out of their way to find a really good moderator that has never been at the festival, to my knowledge. And she gave a really big speech in the beginning, which this is probably the best honor I received for me. Is like, not the reviews, people saying they like the movie, which I do love, and it's really well made, and especially my friends. Oh, it's so well made. She was saying, look past the cinematography and the music and look at the message of Rome. Don't lose that in the filmmaker's work. But then she said, this is probably, she said, the best example of being a white ally you could be. And the reason that means a lot to me is not some like show-offy thing. That was probably the biggest conversations we had making. It wasn't about like, oh, what's the film references? What movies are we trying to make it like? It was like, how do we do this in a way that feels totally fair to Rome, doesn't feel exploitive, tells a story without getting him in trouble, but also making sure financially and everything else that it feels fair, because you don't want the old story of like finding a guy like Rome and kind of, making a big profit off of some movie about his troubles, and then you parachute journalism, call it, and then you leave and you're like, all right, thanks,
never
see you
think
later.
of it again.
Yeah, so it was about trying to really, it's hard. It is not making anyone feel sorry for me, but something I do weigh probably heavier than how are people going to receive this movie? What camera are we going to use? Is like, how are we as, white people from the suburbs of Pennsylvania going to properly tell the story in a way that doesn't feel like white savior and all these things that distract from like,
it was kind of, how do we stay the fuck out of it as much as we can?
Yes. I mean,
and it was when someone recognized that, we were like, all right, cool. we must have done it well enough then.
Yeah, hearing a black activist who's really active in her community saying that this was done right was really reassuring, and thought, okay, cool, we can keep doing stuff like this. Because the minute that we're, the same way when Rome says, the minute I'm not doing what I should be, I would hope my movement would take me out or whatever. In an idealized way, as soon as we're not doing it right and we're not telling that story properly, we'd be the first people to step aside.
If you ever see a movie coming out of me and Kevin, on ourselves,
nobody wants to see us walking around Detroit. Nobody wants to see these two guys walking around Detroit, like with Viggo Mortensen narrating it. Nobody gives a fuck. Like, we want to see Rome tell that story. And the cool thing is, we met Rome's friend, and it was just such a metaphor of like the whole experience of meeting Rome. It's this unlikely team up. Is his friend? We didn't know him at all, and we're like, we're gonna have this guy live with us. Yeah, Rome had only met him recently. The guy who stayed with us, he brought him to Nashville. This guy had only been out of Detroit like 10 times in his life. He's like 30, and he really had not been very far. And he just shows up, and they're like the man of the hour, and everybody's coming up to talk to them. And like seeing that kind of solidarity around a film was really, I don't know if you would have had those people meet under other circumstances, but
he had never seen the film.
He never seen the movie.
It was cool. We were all kind of getting to know each other, and then boom, 50 minutes of Rome. And I think he was blown away. Like, it's just cool to see, like, oh, this is my dude. And he's up there. And I think the true thing is, and I think he had to have said it at one point, is like, it's the same guy. This is the same guy. Yeah. It's authentic.
We captured Rome. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, when we went out, it was a good thing. Is I go out with no expectations. So I'm not going out saying Rome's the man, even though I may think that. You have to separate as a filmmaker and say, I don't know this guy. Maybe he's a shyster. Maybe what the Vanguard, these weasels say is true. Maybe he's not doing what. How do we know? You have to go out there like that. If you go out there like Rome's the man, that's how you're going to capture it. And that's not going to work for anyone. Because if you already like Rome, the last thing we want to create is like a bigger echo chamber where you like, or just hearing yourself reverberate it back. Like, you already love Rome and now you're seeing Rome, is like that kind of sycophant thing. Not on your channel, but you see on YouTube sometimes where they could do anything and, their audience will just go crazy for it. I think it was about creating something where, well, what about someone who doesn't know Rome, like people in Nashville? We need to make a movie that's the baseline, because we already know that Rome supporters are going to like this movie. But how do we reach people that don't even know who Rome is? And you'd be surprised. There are people where you go to pockets and they don't even watch YouTube. Like, they're completely disconnected from any political awareness. So in a way, you also want those people to be able to connect with it. So the fact that both groups have been embracing it, I think that's what Nashville showed us. And to me, Nashville, beyond the screening, was just one of the best weekends of my life. Bunking up with Rome's kind of wild. I mean, we're smoking, we're drinking. We got endless IPA for getting in the fest. I'm partying with this friend of his that I've never met. The Nashville's embracing it though, and they're not scared of the message, and we're all hanging out together. It was exactly what
it was the perfect microcosm.
Yeah, brought everyone together.
Yeah. And it's what we always wanted to do. Like, these ideas from one room, all of us bunked up, but it can be seen by a city, and then it can go from there. I mean, it's up on YouTube now for anyone who wants to watch it.
It's the perfect metaphor for the last time we were on your show. We were saying cinema has power. I mean, it's one thing to say it, but like to bring people together, like this in action. We actually saw like a week later, like, wow, there's 100 people here. I mean, it's crazy.
Like you said, no one breathing. You could see the glass in the eyes.
Like, when the first violin strike, you couldn't hear a word. The whole air got sucked out of the room. And then till the end, when Rome went up, then you couldn't hear yourself because it was like the clapping was so loud. Crazy. Really,
it was powerful in the way only cinema can be.
I mean, how else are you gonna get that many people to come together like that? You know what I mean?
People. It's not a poetry reading. These days.
That is beautiful. One of the things that I wanted to show was what's pinned in your Twitter is talking about the August 31st virtual and in-person event that you guys are going to be having. So I just want to show this so that people will, have their appetite whet for it. And if you guys would like to, I highly recommend that all of you go to rightbrainstudios.tv in order to subscribe. Subscription is a very affordable price, but you guys get a lot of great curated content of revolutionary films. And so I am excited for what's to come on the 31st. By the way, that's one of my brother's birthdays. So that's
get the family all together in one room or Zoom, whatever it is.
Yep. So let me share this with you guys, and I'll meet you guys on the other side. So that's what's going on. And you guys are doing the damn thing as far as getting this. It's really just pushing out this content that a lot of us would never actually see without, you guys.
Can we just roll off like where people, how people, because I think some people might be a little bit confused. We never did it before. We're trying to make it like as simple as possible.
It's a hybrid.
But yeah, so it's a hybrid, virtual and in person. You're gonna see like different dates on different flyers because in North Carolina they're doing an advanced screening, so they can't do it on Thursday. This guy Bailey was able to lock down the library. He's in an activist community, and so they're going to be in Asheville, North Carolina on Tuesday night. It's going to be like an advanced screening. You're going to see it before everybody else. No virtual. You have to be in North Carolina. And then on Thursday, there's going to be a 5 to 7 show in Providence.
Early bird special.
Providence, Rhode Island. And then immediately after that is basically where all the locations are going to be. So if you live in Charlottesville, Virginia, they're doing it at a record store, Visible Records. Miami, Florida, they're doing one. Texas University, they're doing one. In Philadelphia at the Du Bois the Du Bois Center. Yeah, the Du Bois Center. And is there one more we're missing? I have them all written down here. And in the Red Ink Community Library, that's the Providence, Rhode Island one. So yeah, no, I think we got them all. But you'll see each flyer has its specifications. But if you don't live in any of those 7 cities, right? So if you don't live in any of the states like Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania, or any of those, you can still virtually tune into the screening. There's going to be a guest speaker on the virtual one, and then in each location. So Miami, they have their own guest speakers that are going to come in. They've actually been to Cuba and have much more experience with Cuba. And the other one, Washington, D.C., at the Claudia Jones Center. So that's a really good, so we linked up with them, and they're going to have their own guest speakers of people who've also been to Cuba. And then our live event, virtual event, will have guest speakers. So anywhere you go, you're going to be able to ask questions. And that's the thing. We're bringing the cinema side. We're going to do little intros to each film and kind of show you the film side of it, because what's interesting about Cuba is it starts with this like Batista glossy color propaganda consumerist thing about buying products. Government gets overthrown, and then it's lots of just straight documentary. There's really not a lot of like experimentation happening. It's just documenting it as it happened with the guerrillas and with the machine guns and Castro with 100,000 people. But then as the country's been overthrown and you have this new liberation, they start to experiment a little bit. And there's one of the films is actually about Black activism and police brutality in America. So you actually see Cuba making a film about an issue in America, and they have it better than most American filmmakers, which is just crazy. There's no internet back then. I mean, they really were tapping into it. You have on the street stuff with Africa. So in the Haitian Revolution, a lot of people went from Haiti over to Cuba. So you have that Afro-Cuban movement. So we have some of that in the film, the on the street stuff, experimental films, straight documentaries. And then you just get to see how not only as a country did they start to change, but the
and we end on a color film.
Yeah.
The full circle. Yeah. Before, when it was at the most American before the overthrow, you get the color. And it's almost like the cinema had been developed to the point where American cinema was at that point. But then it all comes crashing down, goes that guerrilla style, handheld, black and white, gritty. Like I said, they called it themselves the imperfect cinema. They knew full well that what they were doing, you just get a camera on it. Like, doesn't matter. We'll worry about it later. And that was the documentation. But then, as those the post overthrow years in 64, 65, you can see it settle in. There's a little more narrative experimentation, and it's just really cool. And it's short films. You're not going to lose your attention, and it's just we like to pride ourselves on the curation, and we think we've really figured out just this nice, clean line through it. It tells a story, but it's not our story to tell.
And all the best filmmakers represented. Sarah Gomez. If anybody wants to go look her up, I wish we were playing more of her stuff. But in Hollywood, Hollywood, it was really hard to get female filmmakers back then. But in Cuba, and you look at companies like Cuba and China and stuff like that. I mean, they get a bad rap, but they have a lot more diversity in filmmaking. Like Sarah Gomez is probably one of the lead filmmakers of Cuba. And that's a woman. I mean, there were no lead
filmmakers in 1950.
She died super young, but yeah, the cool thing is we really spent like hundreds of hours curating, and we put a lot of thought into it, and in every little part of it, it was like to start with American funded, Hollywood arm funded propaganda for Batista that's all glossy, then go black and white guerrilla style, and then 17 years later, it's back to color, but now under a communist regime is in a regime in a good way. It's a really cool thing to see. Now they're making color movies. Took them 20 years, but like they fully have evolved now into, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
and again, that's that context. That's understanding how these movies are made. It's not like it's the like I said, the Hollywood factory. It just feels like it goes in, comes out the other side.
The difference with America and Cuba is like you're actually gonna get to see films that night, and we got really good prints of them. Where
it's crisp looking.
Shay's walking around with a grenade launcher, you know, like or like peasant farmers.
Walking
around with a grenade launcher, and like there's like shots of grenades. There's like you're really in the jungle with these guys. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And to be like if the Rome doc, we went to Detroit and we were like. We were with Rome, and he was overthrowing the government.
Yeah, and we're in the back alleys. Yeah, that's what they're doing.
The year that the regime fell, I mean, that Batista fell and fled to wherever he.
Yeah, that rocket launcher probably went and was shot at some fucking.
There's a film again. We won't reveal the title, but there's a film that's like one of the first films their institute made, and that's like peasant farmers with the weakest guns ever, just starting to get class consciousness. Like one of the first propaganda films Castro and his revolutionaries put out. And then the next year, it's machine guns, and they're warding off. They have great names too, like "Death to the Invaders" is one movie that they have, like real cool names. The posters are real remarkable. Like,
that's the other thing. Well, and we won't talk about, but the Cuban cinema, the posters are unbelievable. Yeah. It's a whole style unto themselves.
Yeah, one thing I also want to show this because this is also I saw this on TikTok. And I was like, let me do edit. And so that's what I did. And so this also, I love this particular one that you guys put out too. This was good.
Hoy aprovecho la oportunidad de la visita de un periodista cubano para dar al pueblo de Cuba el primer saludo que tengo oportunidad de dar. De un pueblo que he decidido defender, conociendo solamente a través de la acción y del pensamiento de nuestro jefe Fidel Castro. Llegamos a la patria liberal, con fuego, ya nace comenzando a pero en grandes indeseables y lejanos insaciables, Cuba, a lo que
Great job, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We made all the flyers, we cut all the trailers. We wanted to make it for like in the future, if we want to start hosting these, the idea is like Rome said, build these footholds in different communities, let communities be autonomous with their own needs. But like, if you have a space, we give you the flyer, we give you the stream of the movie, and we'll send a guest speaker there. All you need to do is, just be boots on the ground, help us organize it. I mean, the one thing we can't do is we may not be able to get people in North Carolina to show up because we don't know your community that well, but we'll provide the stream, the artwork, and usually teaming with an organization that has a big reach. Like the National Network on Cuba has been amazing, and just they have a very large reach, and they've been doing a lot of that aspect of it, just helping us get the word out because we are admittedly not the best social media people. We are much more just like, we just care about the film and the art and the curation. That's really where we kind of nerd out. And like Cuban film is just incredible. Cuban culture, the music, the visuals, the old cars, everything about it is just like, I like the way the trailers turned out, but you almost don't need to do anything because it does all the work for you. You just throw some clips of that stuff together, and it's just so amazing.
And I mean, powerful, maybe a cliche term, but that's really what we're trying to get across here. Because, like I said, these people knew they were in the middle of something very important, and they shot for it.
There's filmmakers that have died, like in the Battle of Chile, which is a great film that was shot in Chile during, against what's his name?
Pinochet.
Yeah, so I mean that filmmaker he was killed. I mean, he gave his life for cinema basically. There are filmmakers you wouldn't believe it in America when you see LA and things like that. There's people who will die for cinema, and that's definitely what we're much more inspired by is the John Pilgers and the people that have picked up a camera that maybe didn't know all the know-how and didn't, there's this natural instinctual way of capturing things. A lot of great filmmakers have never made a movie before, and they just grabbed a camera and they knew they were in the company of something very important happening. And that's like with the Rome doc. Like we knew watching Rome's videos that we were in the company of something important. The irony of the Rome thing is they kept asking us, how'd you link up with them? And even Rome's friend, like, why'd you pick Rome? And I think I told you that we had seen him make a video about Tim Black, who we were friends with. And we were like, oh, who's this guy making fun of Tim Black? Watch the video and we're like, whoa,
Yeah.
I think that guy, that's pretty amazing. But now I saw that Tim and him have made some kind of level of peace. It was kind of cool. I think we started the movie with that falling out. And now we've come so far a year and a half later at the end of the movie that even though there's even at least a, hey, we'll be cool kind of thing under Cornell now is like kind of shows a full circle of the whole thing.
Yeah, there's kind of what we like to call a truce. And, we're all of us at Revolutionary Blackout Network, we're very forgiving people. So when it comes to people like Tim Black, we are like, hey, let's unite and let's fight to end this system, because honestly, it is, it's imperative that we, get together, because we may have these differences, but these differences are very small and we can talk these differences out. The ultimate thing is our enemy collectively is this system. And that's one of the things that we're doing to try to end it. And so it is kind of full circle into how you guys got to know Rome. And now we're at this point now where we actually are now coming back together collectively as independent media. And, I also consider you guys as part of independent media too. It's just you guys are the more cinematic arm of independent media, which I always tell people, if you are into independent media, especially ones that are anti-imperialist and want to change a system in a fundamental way, then you need to subscribe to Right Brain Media. Go to rightbrainstudios.tv, because that is also the cinematic arm. So you have the news and interview arm, which is like RBN, my channel, Savvy Sabs. You have the Gray Zone. You have Indie News Network, Black Power Media, Black Agenda Report, so on and so forth. But then you have the cinematic arm of independent media as well, Right Brain Studios, because the thing is that if in order for you to really get it all, this is what you need to do in order to absorb not just the academic information side, which is my side, right? But you also need the side that also kind of evokes emotion and affects you here as well, which is what cinema does. So that's one of the things that I wanted to, convey to people. So you have, our side, the independent information media side, which is the head, and then you have the heart, which is the right brain side, right? And together, it's your system.
You could have said it better. It's there's things that film cannot do that you guys can do, which is why we tell everybody the same thing. Like go sign up, go follow them, especially when the movie came out. Go watch their videos. There's a lot of film fans that aren't as aware as they should be. They know everything about movies, but they don't understand the social cultural context to it. So I think that you provide these two things that really goes hand in hand. Like if something happens in the world right now, you guys can capture that. And that's why I have so much respect for what you guys do. There's so much work in staying on top of it, doing a live stream, being able to get on and be in front of a camera and announce things are happening in the now and tie them to the past, but be able to capture it in the moment. We're not going to be able to make any movies we can tell you ahead of time. We're not probably going to move to TikTok and where we start making like videos of what's happening right this second, because that's just not our role. So I feel like if you combine the two, where you can get that what's happening right now in the moment.
It's the daily jabs. We're the haymaker. Like
we need them both.
If you give us a year, we got a power shot. That's what like the Rome movie is.
Yeah.
And the curation, we're puffing smoke and we're staying up late nights and we're brainstorming this stuff. And yeah, we need a little more time to cook on this stuff. And it takes all levels. Like we said, jabs and haymakers.
I mean, the fight for Julian Assange, the fight for Flint's water, these things that we need that are in this moment right this second, that you want to try to rally people in this moment right this second, that's not necessarily going to be our role, because it takes us a really long time to make something. I actually wish I would have made the Room film a little faster, but we are a little bit perfectionist in that kind of way. But so we need a media that's in the moment right this second, and then to be able to tie that with, like I said, this kind of packing these large punches too, that also fight for the same things and a lot of the same common values. So I think that you take these two things and together. In an ideal world where Rome did overthrow the government, we'd have our media, we'd have at least filmmakers and other filmmakers like us. And one thing we want to see is like, we don't look at it competitively. Maybe that's naive. We want to see more and more smaller underground streaming sites. I mean, go make your own streaming site. They told us it wasn't possible. We're not going to look at it like, oh, we're the only one in town. And we wish there were 10 in town. I mean, the only kind of iffy situations we've had with some of these streaming sites is very early on, they were trying to buy us out, which you take it as a compliment in the moment. Like, wow, we didn't think anyone would be trying to buy us out and take us off the shelf. But then you start looking into it and you're like, why are they trying? Yeah. Why do you want us to not be autonomous? Why do you want us to be a channel on your site? And then we didn't think it was coming in good faith. Like, we need to have a really strong movement. It's more like we need to consolidate under us. And we had people offer me to join like their director's co-op. And to me, it sounded like a guy, again, just taking a cut of what we're doing that we felt like wasn't really making movies. So it just kind of felt like being under another boss, I guess you could say. Yeah. So like, we fully believe like there should be a revolutionary blackout. They don't all need to be under one banner. And that's what some of the things we've run into in our world is we're meeting these smaller streaming sites. And their main goal at the end of a conversation when they set up a meeting with us is they want us to come under their thing, basically. And like, they want everything to be merged under one thing. They want to buy up all the YouTube channels and things like that. And like, we think it's like Rome, like it's much stronger when you have all these different pockets that are autonomous. They all have different needs. The Cuban activists in Florida have their needs. Rome's people have their needs, and we need to allow these groups to grow strong on their own and come together instead of trying to shove everyone into like one pocket.
It's that's why we call ourselves an anti-imperialist streaming site, and the work we make, our originals on there, are always from that perspective. It ain't about a big tent or nothing. It's about, if you're to the left, like you don't want imperialism, like you're cool with us. We will, like you said, we probably have more in common than you would even imagine. Doesn't matter color, where you're from, like what you work, what your parents' wealth situation was. We all understand what's happening. We all can see the fucking rot. And so it's getting many of us together, joined up on the same page. Like you said, all that infighting, we can cheers to that after we set fire to that fucking Hollywood sign up in the mountain. Like those decisions could be made later. Right now, we got to get the fucking boot off of everyone's throat.
That's why, like,
we can agree on that.
It's like they think I'm like winking. Like some of the people who found us through Rome is like they were telling me they're like, you're a socialist streaming site. It's like, no, we're not. You're a communist streaming site. No, we're not. Like what you may think about our own beliefs, you can take from the work we curate, but we don't see any reason to put a sign on the door that says like communist streaming sites. It's like, how do you reach the person who you don't think you would reach, and how do you even have them start to explore and develop some kind of consciousness to imperialism if you're like already telling them at the door that you need to be this or you need to be that? We don't give a fuck who you voted for. If you voted for someone that we didn't like, I mean, maybe you go on the site and your mind's opened up to a world you didn't expect, but we just don't need people who already believe all these things already reaffirming their own beliefs about trying to reach a larger audience and find a level of consciousness they may not be aware of. So by saying anti-imperialism, I mean, look, we actually refunded somebody because we found out he was an imperialist. It's like the most non-business move thing, but we saw him on Twitter saying some things that were fairly openly imperialist. We just contacted him, we're like, hey man, sorry, here's your money back. Fuck off. We don't, you're obviously either like acting in bad faith, a Fed, or like God knows what else. And like, you can have your money. We don't want it. But beyond that, I mean, it's one time and he was saying some pretty egregious shit about China and about other countries. But generally the idea is like, anti-imperialist is something most people like to believe they are, but I don't think they actually are, especially the modern left. But I think that creating a space where you pick something that's a little broader than communism. And also a lot of the communist streaming sites we see is like, they're trying to teach people. Like you go on our site to learn class consciousness. We're not teaching you anything. We're providing you like an art gallery and you take from it what you want. Maybe you love cinematography. Maybe you love the struggle for Cuba, but it's supposed to be a very much the audience caters their own experience. Like you get out of Right Brain TV what you want to, and God, please don't spend all day watching it. Get the hell out there, get food for your community, like do direct action, like hope it's a spark, like you said, that spark to go do something. We do not want you to hedge out and watch 18 Cuban movies for
We don't want that 8-episode binge. Like watch 2 and get off the couch. A lot of literature on there too. Some stuff if you do want to sit there and you got a long train ride or something, you can read this up and you can do it on your phone.
Well, the thing also is that what you're doing by showing these films is actually humanizing people in countries that get demonized all the time.
That's a great word. 100%.
Yeah, I think we described it too as like in the same vein. It's like I feel like that's the cool thing about film is you're able to understand kind of what we're trying to do based more on the work we make than anything you could probably say. And I think the idea was always, especially American documentaries, all about turning humans into statistics. You get the numbers, and then you get like an interview with Bill Gates or something. It's about not only putting the voice back to the people and giving them that platform, but turning humans from statistics back into people. Like we could have done the Rome doc and been like, started off with like 30,000 people in Detroit go, poor every year, whatever, and like did all these statistics and facts. But there's like something so dehumanizing about taking all these individual lives and like making them just like a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper. I think that that's probably the least and lowest common denominator.
We don't do the like Showtime style talking heads. Like here's 10 luminaries. Let's hear what they think. Like fuck those guys. Let's hear what the people like on the ground think.
When we went to Nashville, people couldn't believe how cheap we made that movie. I mean, we're gonna say $4,000 sounds like a lot to people. Like, wow, that's a lot of money. Like, I mean, that's a $20,000 camera. We were on Len basically. Like that movie was made with a
gas money.
Yeah, it's made with like a Netflix grade camera. We drove all the way to Detroit. We had to stay overnight. We had to get a sound guy.
People out.
Yeah, we had to drive a sound guy to fly out. I mean, he was a real professional sound guy. They're not cheap. Like to make a movie that long, and also the first day, fucking Pete Buttigieg and transportation. Our So we drove the equipment up. It was a lot of money in equipment that was not ours. And then our camera guy and sound guy were going to fly in, and we were going to go to the Tour for the Poor. And that's why the movie title changes. His flight got delayed, so he wasn't going to be there for like 6 hours. So we lost the first day completely. We got Rome said that we were running on Black people time. That's the first thing. First thing he said when we met him. First thing he said when we met him is he's like, "Oh, here's my camera crew on Black people time." But like, yeah, the first day was a wash. Like most of the people had already left. That's why we shoot that. So the thing is, we don't lie in film. The least amount of manipulation is important to us. But the bottom line is there was a big crowd for Rome's giveaway, and we missed it. We just made it a part of the thing where you shoot him really close, and you're only seeing his hands, and like it kind of worked. But like it was also a way of showing. I mean, it just wasn't the crowd that it was because of things outside our control. So I think that I just think that like that movie was made by like on a fraction of what a Hollywood movie was made on. I mean, it's unbelievable. Documentaries now are made for like $20 million. We made that movie for $4,000 and like self-funded it. You know what I mean? Like,
and our whole crew. I mean, everyone sacrificed. You want to talk about? We were all jammed in a small Airbnb, and I mean, nothing was comfortable.
Oh, it was not luxurious. Yeah. Nobody would fucking fund that movie. We were like taking it to investors. We're like showing Rome's following. We're saying like it's going to be controversial, but that breeds, trying to sell it to a film investor, and nobody would.
It's the old story. We went into our own pockets, and life savings just kind of flipped out the pockets and said,
"I had a little bit of life savings, not much from my dad passing away. I mean, it was not much. It's a couple grand." I told my wife like, "This is all we have. Can I put it into the Rome doc?" And she was like, I showed her, I pitched it to her, and she was like, "Do it, thumbs up, go for it."
Based. Look, guys, I just want to thank you guys for coming on. Just wanted to share this also with everybody. Just in case, I already put the link inside the chat just so that you guys can see, but this is the National Network on Cuba. This is their website as well. They are doing work on really the humanization of Cubans and the country of Cuba, as well as working to get, it says, welcome to NNOC website. Please explore our resources and check out our off the list campaign urging Biden to remove Cuba from the list of state sponsors of terrorism. So this is what they're doing, and they are working along with Right Brain Studios as far as trying to get these short films out on the 31st. If you guys would like to, you guys can go to rightbrainstudios.tv in order to get access to these films, to watch it virtually if you're not in any one of the 7 cities that they will be doing. And just make sure to subscribe, because I think that, it's a great resource. If you think that Revolutionary Blackout Network's a great resource, then use that in conjunction, have that in conjunction with Right Brain Studios TV, rightbrainstudios.tv as well. So
we want to shout out everybody on your network, Nick and Sabby and everybody. You guys do incredible work, and we're, I might have missed one person, but we're CJ. We're just so happy that you guys exist. And for us, it was about teaming up like we're doing with Cuba, just teaming up with these different organizations we really love and trying to introduce what we do with what you do, because you need both. Like I said, you can't feed people by teaching them Marxist or even making a great piece of cinema. And like, it's about us, different groups coming together. So for us to meet with, the Cuba, they don't know as much about Cuban cinema as we do, and we don't know nearly as much about Cuba as they do. So to be able to bring that together and have guest speakers that have actually been to Cuba, but also have people who have really studied their film work. We hope to do more of these. So any organization watching, if you're in any activist group, and even if it's a smaller thing that's not as big as Cuba, maybe it's like Venezuela or something like that, we're very interested in exploring cinema we don't know. And if you have an issue, link up with us. We'll make it work. We'll find that Venezuelan cinema.
The Revolutionary Review is, like we said, it's the the masthead of an upcoming series. I mean, we're gonna have a bunch of these. We're gonna go all over the world.
Yeah.
And so if you have a good lead on some old films, like I mean, some of the most fun of this is like we get to learn some stuff ourselves, and we just keep pulling threads, and like it's amazing what you'll find if you look.
When we picked Cuba, we thought we knew Cuban cinema, and we really, after 100 hours of just nerding out, we're like, wow, this is a deep hole. This goes real deep. So yeah, thank you so much for letting us get our message out. We don't do that many podcasts. Like I said, most people would rather than talk about Rome's new movie, they'd rather have the 5th video about AOC and something stupid she said. So I'm glad somebody out there, it's like great that you guys have been pushing his message, because I would much rather even talk about Rome than even the semi-class conscious guy from Richmond. I think Rome is, that song is awesome. I'm not knocking it, but I mean, you think people would do like 5 videos on Rome? And because I made the movie, just because Rome is so dope and what he's doing.
No,
and it would just
more people see it, and more it's going to get out there. And we've already seen it after the film festival. So
thanks for always putting us on. That's
you're the man.
Definitely. Thank you so much, guys. Kevin and Mark from Right Brain Studios. Also, their links are for their social media as well as to their website is also in the description below. Go ahead and subscribe from there. Thank you guys so much for joining Kevin and Mark.
There you guys.
All right. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you, man.